And one of America's most successful spies in the 2000s in Africa was a guy called Darrell Blocker. He was, in fact, a CIA agent working undercover in Africa. He was recruited by CIA, and in 2003 he was at a bar in Uganda called Bubbles O'Leary, and he saw a band called Kampala Jazz All-Stars, and the music wasn't going all that well, so he suggested to them that they should do a bit of Bob Marley, and the crowd loved it. The band asked him to join in, and they became one of Uganda's most popular bands, and Blocker became a local Ugandan celebrity. In his other life, he was the head of the whole of the CIA in Africa. But he said his cover was perfect because nobody suspects a singer of being a spy.
Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, today we're going to be talking about a topic that I don't think anybody has ever spoken about. I could be wrong, but we're going to be talking about the history of the U.S. government employing black males in particular to function as assets of intelligence, gather intelligence, undermine foreign nations, particularly black nations. And what inspired this video was the new black media. Guys like the Black Authority, who I call the Black Irrelevancy, Professor Black Truth, who I call Professor Black Fiction, and of course Tariq Nasheed. Of course, these guys spend the majority of their time talking about Africans and Caribbeans all day, and Tariq in particular spends his time debating with African cab drivers. And a consistent thing you hear in their broadcast is these Africans are undermining us. They come into the country, they undermining us. These black immigrants come into the country and undermining us, undermining, right? So today we're going to talk about the history of the U.S. government employing black males to go around the world to undermine black sovereignty, whether overtly or covertly, whether intentionally or unwittingly. Now, if you watch my video yesterday in regards to the ongoing dispute between Tariq and Professor James Smalls, I had said that in every group, you're going to find what you call turncoat sellouts, those who, are advancing the interests of the opposition, the adversary against their own people, right? Every group has those individuals, but I noticed that when it comes to the individuals at the new black media, right, Tariq Nasheed, Professor Black Fiction, the Black Irrelevancy, they try to push this false narrative as if it's a one-sided affair, right? The black immigrants coming to the country and undermining us. So I'm going to provide the opposite side of the story and show you that actually it's much more nuanced than that. Just like every single group has turncoats and sellouts, your group also has turncoats and sellouts that has been engaging in similar behavior for over a century. So what I'm going to do in this video is to provide that much needed balance to the discussion, because I noticed that it's a lot of fake history going around, right? A lot of fake narratives. So I think it's good to provide balance to the discussion. And also I think it's just an interesting topic that nobody has ever touched on before. Now, like I said in my video last night, every group has turncoats and sellouts, but also every group has those who are working tirelessly every single day for the upliftment and the defense and prosperity of the race, right? That's the nuance in the discussion that has to be acknowledged. But of course, the individuals at the new black media, the Black Irrelevancy, the Black Professor Black Fiction, and Tariq, what they do is they make it seem like their group has all the individuals fighting for the race and everybody else is fighting to undermine the race. So I'm going to provide the nuance to that conversation, right? Now, I know that's not going to stop them from going on their propaganda campaign. They're still going to be pushing the same narratives, but at least I did my part in adding the much needed balance to the discussion. Now, let's get started. Now, as you can see, the CIA, it had a few names in the beginning. At first, it was called the Office of the Coordinator of Information, then the Office of Strategic Services, then the Strategic Services Unit, then the Central Intelligence Group, and then now we know today the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. But obviously, we know that espionage and employing spies, that goes back way before the creation of the CIA and the FBI, right? Espionage has been employed by governments around the world. That's just part of statecraft. That's just part of government, right? So even though the CIA was formally created back in the 1940s, they've had spies domestically and overseas since the beginning of the country. Now, in this video, we're going to discuss various categories of agents, right? You have those who were the overt spies. These were the men who were fully integrated, that were just fully invested. They were 100% aware of what they were doing, and they were here to advance U.S. interests, U.S. hegemony. These men were all in, right? Then you had another category. You had the unwitting assets, right? These were individuals who maybe they didn't really know, what they were involved in. They might have been used to advance what I call, soft power, right? United States soft power overseas, but these were not trained operatives. right? These were not men who were, employed by the intelligence agency, but regardless, they might have been used as Trojan horses to advance U.S. interests. So there's different categories. So everybody we're going to discuss today is not an overt spy. Some might have just been unwitting. Some might have been overt. Some might have been, so it's different categories. So I'm going to make that disclaimer before we get started. But anyway, let's get into the episode today. Take a look up on the screen. Latinos make up about 18% of the American population, but just 7% of the roughly 100,000 person intelligence community and 3.5% of the senior officers. Black officers comprise 12% of the intelligence community, the same as the U.S. population, but 6.5% at the most senior level. And while minorities comprise 27% of the total intelligence workforce, just 15% of the senior executives are people of color, right? So about 12% of the CIA is black men and women. And at the senior level is 6.5% black, right? So obviously we're not going to know the identities and the activities of these guys who are currently active in the agency right now, because that's classified information. That's top secret. You're going to learn about that decades later. But the CIA definitely employs, a decent amount of black men and black women. But we're going to be talking about the black men today, because mainly it's the black men at the new black media that want to push this narrative that it's the black immigrants coming to the United States to undermine, while they turn a blind eye to the black men in their own group working for the CIA to undermine and advance U.S. interests overseas. So I'm going to provide that much needed balance to the discussion to, hit these guys in the chest. But anyway, let's continue. The first individual we're going to be talking about today, and it's going to be highly controversial, is Frederick Douglass. Now, I don't put Frederick Douglass in the category of the overt spy, like somebody like Daryl Blocker, who was a veteran CIA agent. I wouldn't put him in that category, but I would put him in a category of somebody who tried to do a balancing act between advancing American interests while trying to stand in solidarity with his brothers at the same time. And that's going to be impossible for you to do, which is why he ended up getting fired at the end of the day. Well, he didn't get fired, but he resigned from his post, right? So I wouldn't put him in the category of a spy, but he was reporting back to the State Department. He was feeding information to the State Department. He was functioning as a diplomat in the country. So part of his job description was to feed intelligence to the executives at Washington. But I wouldn't say that he was an overt spy looking to undermine, but he tried to do the balancing act between advancing U.S. interests and standing in solidarity with his brothers, which is impossible to do. So anyway, let's get into Frederick Douglass. And before we get started, I just want to lay the foundation for the context of what was happening during that time, right? So the United States during that time was seeking to establish a naval base in Haiti during that time. And they decided that the best way to convince the Haitians to allow them to do so was to send a respected black man in Frederick Douglass, because maybe, they might be more willing to, do business with us if we send somebody like Frederick Douglass who they respect, and then maybe they could, give us the military base, right? So anyway, take a look up on the screen. The Mole St. Nicholas affair was an 1891 diplomatic incident between Haiti and the United States. In an act of gunboat diplomacy, the President of the United States, Benjamin Harrison, ordered Rear Admiral Bancroft Girardi to persuade the cession or lease of Mole St. Nicolas to the United States in order to establish a naval base for the United States Navy. Following a prolonged request for Girardi's diplomatic credentials and increased public pressure, Haiti refused the request of the United States. Now let's get into the inner workings of how the United States was trying to maneuver and use Frederick Douglass to, convince the Haitian government to allow them to establish a naval base on the island in the area of Mole St. Nicolas. Let's get into it. Take a look up on the screen. Between 1857 and 1913, the United States Navy was dispatched to Haiti 19 times for interventions aimed at protecting American interests. When President Harrison ran as the Republican candidate for the 1888 election, Frederick Douglass's support was integral to securing the Northern black votes and defeating a black congressional candidate opposing Harrison's man in Virginia. When Harrison won the presidency, Secretary of State James Blaine offered Frederick Douglass the position of Minister Resident and Consul General to the Republic of Haiti, afterward adding the Charge d'Affaires of Santo Domingo to his portfolio. There was a precedent for Frederick Douglass's appointment. It continued a policy of sending black ambassadors that began when the United States formally recognized Haiti and Liberia back in 1862. Motivated in equal measure by paternalism and cynicism, the United States believed that appointing Negro diplomats would grease the commercial and political relations with Negro republics. The State Department hoped to use Frederick Douglass's influence to undermine Haitian independence while strengthening the United States expansionist project in the Caribbean, right? So that's why I say Frederick Douglass was not an overt intelligence agent, but the United States, the State Department, hoped to use his influence and his prestige to advance their interests at the expense of the Haitian government, right? Let's continue. Frederick Douglass's letters to Secretary of State James Blaine also contain a hopeful and positive tone concerning the political prospects of the Republic. Frederick Douglass's initial audience with President Hippolyte, that was the Haitian president, was a generous and effusive affair. President Hippolyte told Frederick Douglass how all of Haiti had followed Frederick Douglass's career and that for Haitians, Frederick Douglass represented the moral and intellectual development of men of the African race by personal effort and mental culture. Now, shout out to President Florville Hippolyte, Pan-African head of state, you know what I mean, right? Men of the African race, you know what I mean? You heard the language, we've been talking like that, yeah. Since the days of Christoph, we've been talking like that. So all these new guys talking about we not African, you're not part of the race. I don't know you, I don't recognize you, fuck you. Anyway, let's continue. The next summer, Frederick Douglass departed for Port-au-Prince. The position of U.S. Minister Resident and Consul General to Haiti had become the prime patronage post for Black Republicans during Reconstruction, and it would maintain that status into the 20th century. Frederick Douglass was well aware of the significance of his position and the singular importance of Haiti. In a letter published by leading white and black newspapers just before his departure, Frederick Douglass acknowledged that white men and women often pointed to Haiti and cried out, "Look at it, torn and rent by division and revolution," before asking, "What can we expect of the American Negro?" Accordingly, Frederick Douglass admitted that he embarked on his mission to represent the interests of the United States and also with a view to advance the interests of Haitians and African Americans. So, as you can see, Frederick Douglass tried to play this balancing act, which is impossible to do, right? I'm here to represent the interests of the United States. I'm here to advance Western interests, but I'm also here to advance the interests of Haitians and African Americans, which is impossible to do because Western interests and the interests of black men and women are totally opposed to each other. So Frederick Douglass embarked on a task that was basically impossible. But anyway, let's continue. The man who appointed Frederick Douglass threatened these goals. Republican Benjamin Harrison subscribed to a long-standing belief that Haiti's Mont Saint-Nicolas was a desirable prize because of the location at the northern entrance of the Windward Passage, its ample harbors, and its defensible geographic features. The administration wasted little time in acting upon this belief. 8 months after Harrison's inauguration, the Yantique, an unauthorized U.S. naval warship, arrived at the mole. Now, when I say the mole, that's the Mont Saint-Nicolas. That's where the United States wanted to establish a naval base, right? So arrived at the mole to measure the distance from the Haitian port to other Caribbean islands where Europeans had established telegraph cables. By the winter of 1890, U.S. Secretary of State James Blaine had authorization to use force to acquire the mole, while Bancroft Girardi monitored the political situation in Haiti to assess the prospects for U.S. territorial gains. A little more than 1 year later, Frederick Douglass sat in a meeting in Port-au-Prince, perplexed. Rear Admiral Bancroft Girardi, the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Navy, sat at his side. Now, this right here, that's Admiral Bancroft Girardi, right? That's this white man they talking about right here, right? So anyway, let's continue. The military officer, unschooled in international diplomacy and notorious for his temper and his arrogance, blustered on and on about Haiti's obligation to give up part of its territory to the United States. Man, these white bozos. Anyway, let's continue. Across the table, the Haitian Minister of Finance and Foreign Affairs, the illustrious ancestor Antonin Firmin, and Haitian President Florville Hippolyte sat unmoved. There was little need for their interpreter. Both Haitian politicians could see Girardi's message and his instability in his reddened face. It was also obvious from his unnecessarily loud tone. Now, time out. I loved how they described the meeting, right? So you have Frederick Douglass and Bancroft Girardi on one side, and Bancroft Girardi, he just going off, right? His face is red, he's angry, he's yelling, he's banging on the table, just being a belligerent, caveman, barbarian, white man from Louisiana, right? And then on the other side, you have President Florville Hippolyte, right? North side representative. And then you have Antonin Firmin, right? On the other side, they're not even saying nothing. They're just looking at him, right? Just not even saying nothing, unmoved, right? On the other side of the table, unmoved. No emotion, just looking at him with the stone face, right? He going off, yelling, belligerent. They're not even saying nothing. We just sitting calm and collected, elegant, stoic, and calculated black men, right? We're not going to be moved by your belligerence. We're not fazed by your hostile energy, banging on the table, turning red, looking stupid. You think we're fazed by that? We don't give a goddamn about that. You know what I'm saying? Bancroft Girardi looking stupid. Anyway, let's continue. On April 21st, 1891, Frederick Douglass and Bancroft Girardi presented the new lease proposal to Antonin Firmin. The Haitians responded the next day, declining to grant it. Antonin Firmin argued that The terms of the lease would inaugurate a profound erosion of Haitian independence, as it would effectively give up the republic's sovereign right to dispose of its territory according to its own wishes. In the following days, Frederick Douglass had asked Antoine Firmin if he would be open to reconsidering the lease if the United States fleet was withdrawn from Haitian waters, right? So not only was Bancroft Girardi, acting belligerent, looking stupid, banging on the table, putting on a show, but the United States also dispatched warships to the harbor to, I guess, intimidate the nation. So Frederick Douglass basically came to Antoine Firmin, who, they were friends at the time, Antoine Firmin, mutual respect, right? So Frederick Douglass basically said, would you be open to giving up the territory to the United States if the warships, were removed from the harbor, right? So Frederick Douglass still kind of trying to do the balancing act, advance U.S. interests while not being, a turncoat at the same time. Let's continue. Against these obstacles, Frederick Douglass strived for a more enlightened diplomacy. On New Year's Day, 1891, Antoine Firmin paid Frederick Douglass a visit. The Haitian official denounced a United States newspaper for repeating the allegation that President Hippolyte had promised Mont Saint-Nicolas to the United States as recompense for helping bringing them to power. Now, yes, that's the nuance to the discussion. So President Frederick Hippolyte came to power with the backing of the United States. The United States clandestinely provided weapons for him to overthrow the government. And then once he got into power, he basically told the United States that I'm not going to do anything for you. He basically said, thank you for the weapons, thank you for helping bringing me to power, but I'm not gonna do anything for you. I'm not gonna give you the naval base. I'm not gonna give you any trade agreements, but thank you for your services and helping bringing me to power. That's also why Bancroft Girardi was so angry and belligerent, because he's like, you have an obligation to give us this territory, to pay us back for helping bringing you to power, giving you, the weapons and ammunition and things like that. And, President Hippolyte, big boss man, big North Side representative, he was like, listen, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, right? I hear what you're saying, but I don't care, though. I don't care what you're talking about, right? I'm the president of the republic now, North Side representative, North Side general, right? So I'm going to do what I want to do. And of course they was mad. The ancestors, they was different, man. They didn't give a goddamn about the European, right? I don't care if you did something for me. You're a white man, bro. I don't owe you nothing, right? Thank you for the free weapons. Let's continue. Antoine Firmin denounced a United States newspaper for repeating the allegations that President Hippolyte had promised the Mont Saint-Nicolas to the United States as recompense for helping bringing them to power. Frederick Douglass agreed that the claim was baseless, but he stressed that the United States government's willingness to lease, rent, or purchase the mole according to the proper means consistent with the peace and welfare of Haiti. Although the conversation was interrupted, Antoine Firmin's icy reaction to Frederick Douglass's proposal reinforced the U.S. diplomat's belief that there was no point upon which the people of Haiti are more united than upon any question touching on the cession of any part of their territory. Now, that is what Frederick Douglass had said to the State Department. That was the intelligence that he was feeding to the State Department. He said that there is no point upon which the people of Haiti are more united than the question upon their territory. They are united in the fact that they're not giving up an inch of their territory. Even if we help the president come to power, he doesn't give a damn about that. Anyway, let's continue. The arrival of United States naval vessels off the coast of Haiti during the Mont Saint-Nicolas affair provoked a wave of anger amongst the population, especially in the northern departments. News of an American attempt to pressure the government into surrendering the mole spread rapidly. In towns surrounding the Cap, local militias began drilling in open fields and preparing for the possibility of an armed conflict. Peasants in the countryside spoke openly about resisting an American landing, insisting that they would fight even with the limited weapons available to them. The northern generals reinforced that mood, stating publicly that they would burn the mole to the ground instead of surrender a single inch of the territory. The atmosphere in the region grew increasingly tense as crowds gathered in the streets to denounce foreign interference and to demand that the government reject any concessions. Even if the Haitian administration had wished to entertain American proposals, the mood of the country made such a compromise politically impossible. The swelling protests signaled that any agreement seen as weakening Haiti's territorial integrity would be met with widespread resistance. That was the end of Frederick Douglass's control over what became known as the Mont Saint-Nicolas affair. On January 25, 1891, Bancroft Girardi arrived in Port-au-Prince with instructions to supplant Frederick Douglass and assume the lead role in negotiations for the port. 3 days later, Bancroft Girardi, Frederick Douglass, Antoine Firmin, and President Hippolyte and an interpreter sat around a conference table discussing the United States acquisition of territory that contemporaries suggested had become tied to national autonomy in the Haitian imagination. Girardi insisted that the mole was the United States government's rightful possession in return for the services rendered. Frederick Douglass tried to assuage Haitian fears, promising that the concession asked for was in the line of good neighborhood and advanced civilization, and in every way consistent with the autonomy of Haiti. President Hippolyte and Antonin Firmin balked at the suggestion, to the great consternation of Bancroft Girardi. After Antonin Firmin had denied that the mole had been promised to the United States, the temperamental naval officer Bancroft Girardi shouted that President Hippolyte was morally bound to concede the mole. For Frederick Douglass, the lessons of this embarrassing episode in United States history were clear, enduring even. In the summer of 1891, Frederick Douglass resigned his diplomatic post and returned to Cedar Hill House at his home. There, in a library whose walls soon included the portraits of Toussaint Louverture and President Florville Hippolyte, Frederick Douglass crafted his response to white critics who blamed him for the failed negotiations for the mole. Frederick Douglass had pointed out that the United States had given Bancroft Girardi a role for which he had no preparation solely because he was white, and Haitians were supposed to be more than willing to defer to a white man. That assumption was laughable. Frederick Douglass said that it showed a stunning ignorance of Haitian history. Besides, he continued, even if a white diplomat could have exploited the Haitians, a supposedly great country like the United States should ask nothing of Haiti on grounds less just and reasonable than upon those which they would ask of France or England. Now, as you can see, that's why I say Frederick Douglass wasn't what you would call an overt spy, but I would say one of the more unwitting spies, tried to play the balancing act between his role as a diplomat representing the State Department and at the same time his role as a black man and, interfacing with his fellow black men, right? So obviously, it's an impossible task. So he ended up resigning altogether. But the reason why the State Department had sent him out on that mission was because they believed that because the Haitians had such great respect for Frederick Douglass and because, the Haitians, have respect for our fellow black men and women in general, they thought that that would be a tool that they could use to convince the government to give up the naval base. But, even though we had love for Frederick Douglass, we couldn't do it. We can't do that. Got love for you, bro, but can't do that. Can't do it. Anyway, let's continue. Next person I want to talk about is Charles Young, right? American military man Charles Young, the first black military attache, the first black man to achieve the rank of colonel in the United States Army. Now, this is what you would call an overt spy, right? This was not like a Frederick Douglass. This black man, he was working for the white man. He was working for the government. It wasn't no two ways about it. It was direct. He was an overt spy, right? Let's get into it. Charles Young was an American soldier, the third African-American graduate of the United States Military Academy, the first black U.S. National Park Superintendent, the first black military attaché, the first black man to achieve the rank of the colonel in the Army, and the highest ranking black officer in the regular Army until his death in 1922. With the Army's founding of the Military Intelligence Department in 1904, they assigned Young as one of the first military attachés serving in Port-au-Prince. He was to collect intelligence on different groups in Haiti to help identify forces that might destabilize the government. He served there for 3 years. Now, keep in mind, the United States Marines would go on to invade the country and occupy the country in 1915. But you notice that in 1904, they started sending little spies and things like that, right? Of course, they couldn't send a white man because a white man would stick out like a sore thumb in Haiti. A white man couldn't even own land back in those days, right? So they had to send somebody that would blend in. They had to send somebody that would be welcomed in as family. They had to send somebody that wouldn't be, met with hostility. So they sent Charles Young. They sent Charles Young over to Haiti. And of course, he was welcomed in as family, welcomed in with open arms. Little did the family know, little did we know that he was here sent by the State Department to gather intelligence, to lay down the foundation and the groundwork for what would lead to the eventual invasion and occupation 10 years later. Right. So that's the earliest examples of black men being used as intelligence assets to undermine black sovereignty in different black nations, right? But of course, the new black media will never talk about individuals like this because, of course, that would destroy their entire narrative because they're in the business of pushing narratives. They're not in the business of telling the truth. But anyway, let's continue. Young was the first African-American appointed to serve in that capacity since the birth of the attaché system in 1889. He was an accomplished linguist, fluent in Latin, Greek, French, Spanish, and German. From 1904 to 1907, he served in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, where he made an extended military reconnaissance of the country and the neighboring Republic of Santo Domingo and produced maps of the terrain. So like I said, this was an overt spy. It wasn't like Frederick Douglass where he was trying to play both sides. No, he had no love for his fellow black men. He was working for the white man. He was here to advance the interests of the white man and undermine the interests of the black man at large. Now let's continue. I want to talk about James Wormley Jones. James Wormley Jones was an African-American policeman and World War I veteran who was best known for having been the first African-American FBI special agent. Now this is domestic, right? We talked about international. Now we're going to talk about some of the domestic agents. So let's get into this one. James Wormley Jones, the first FBI agent, the first black man FBI agent. James Wormley Jones was appointed as the first African-American special agent on November 19th, 1919 by the Bureau of Investigation Director, Bruce Belaski. Jones was assigned to a new section of the Justice Department created to track the activities of groups perceived as subversive. His work there was under the direct supervision of J. Edgar Hoover. During his time in the FBI, Jones served in New York City and Pittsburgh. In New York, he was assigned to infiltrate the Universal Negro Improvement Association under the leadership of Marcus Garvey, the UNIA. Although he was seeking evidence of subversive activities during the Red Scare of 1919, his work led to the arrest and trial of Garvey on mail fraud charges. So this guy was one of the main figures behind the eventual arrest and deportation of Marcus Garvey and the destruction of that entire movement down in New York City, right? Let's continue. In August 1921, Jones began conducting similar surveillance on the African Blood Brotherhood. Eventually, he was recognized as a police officer. He was no longer an asset as a clandestine agent, and he resigned from the FBI in 1923. He died in 1958 in Pennsylvania. Anyway, let's continue. Take a look up on the screen. George Hocker broke through the barriers as one of the CIA's first black spy masters. Now, this is another one of those overt spies, right? Not one of those unwitting, no, overt spy. After witnessing Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, George Hocker decided that he was not going to let discrimination define him, and he was going to be a black spy for his country. Let's get into it. Out of a class of 75, George Hocker was the only black person. He passed the course and went on to blaze a trail as one of the Central Intelligence Agency's first black clandestine officers, the first to open a CIA station overseas, and the first to lead a branch inside the Directorate of Operations. George Hocker's career included extensive work collecting secrets in Africa. He served on multiple tours throughout the continent, where he executed missions with excellence. Now, you notice that a lot of these guys, man, the first, like Charles Young, this guy right here, the first places they sent them was black countries because they know that naturally, they use the Pan-Africanism against us, right? Because as a Pan-Africanist, you're gonna, that's my brother, right? I got love for my brother. So they use that against us. Right? They used our Pan-Africanism against us because we're going to open our doors, come have a seat, brother. You my brother. Right? So that's why as Pan-Africanists, we have to be, on top of our game, on top of our guard. Right? We can't just assume everybody black, everybody black got love for Pan-Africanism. Everybody black is for black unity. Everybody black is for black prosperity and black sovereignty. You can't just assume that. And that's why, I remember back, a couple weeks back, few months back, it was the whole, O'Shea Duke Jackson talking about citizenship in Burkina Faso. And I said that no African nation should just have a policy where anybody black could just get citizenship and come to the country so easily. No, because it's so many black agents, not only in the CIA, but also in the DGSE, also in the MI6, in various intelligence agencies. They have black men employed. Right. And they use that Pan-Africanism against us. They use that, oh, man, you my brother against us so they could come in and do the bidding of the adversary. That's why as Pan-Africanists, we have to, definitely have a hardline stance against those who want to not only subvert Pan-Africanism or denigrate Pan-Africanism, but those who want to use that as a cover against us so they can, infiltrate and get on the inside. And of course, we know that they employ black women in these intelligence agencies also, but I'm only focusing on the black men because it's the black men, right? The black men at the New Black Media, Tariq, Professor Black Fiction, the Black Irrelevancy. It's the black men that's leading the charge of the anti-Pan-Africanism movement. So that's the reason why I'm focusing on the black male CIA agents. But of course, they have black women as well, right? The women make the best agents, right? Women make the best agents, but I'm focusing on the black men today because the black men are the leading voices in the anti-Pan-Africanism movement. So that's why I'm focusing on the black males. Anyway, let's continue. George Hocker wound up being the first black officer to undertake months-long escape and evasion training as part of the program. His skill, determination, and intrinsic resilience carried him through graduation, and he went on to serve multiple tours across Africa and South America. In each assignment, he executed the mission with excellence, demonstrating how racial diversity enables CIA's operational success overseas. Now, the next individual I want to talk about is Brian Nichols, right? Brian Nichols. Now, he was a diplomat. He was part of the Foreign Service, the U.S. diplomacy. But you got to understand, the CIA and the U.S. Foreign Service, the diplomats and the ambassadors, they work side by side, right? U.S. ambassadors, the embassy and things like that, and the intelligence agencies, they work side by side, bro. So anyways, let's talk about Brian Nichols. Brian Andrew Nichols is an American diplomat who served as the Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs until his retirement in January 2025. He previously served as the United States Ambassador to Peru and the U.S. Ambassador to Zimbabwe. Now let's get into Brian Nichols. Following the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021, the presidency was vacant. The Constitution was contested, and two political figures claimed executive authority. The United States became a central actor in shaping the transition. At the center of his diplomatic effort was Brian Nichols, the United States Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. Nichols was part of a broader strategy by Washington. His role became particularly significant in three interconnected areas. Number one, the support for the administration of Ariel Henry. Number two, pressuring the interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph to step aside. Number three, aligning international partners behind a single governing authority led by Ariel Henry. The U.S. State Department, through public statements and high-level engagements, signaled a clear preference for Ariel Henry to assume the role of Prime Minister. Brian Nichols, representing the highest political office in the State Department for the Western Hemisphere, was instrumental in articulating and advancing this position. Brian Nichols engaged Haitian political actors, international diplomats, and regional organizations to express Washington's view that Ariel Henry's appointment should be honored. So this guy was responsible for Ariel Henry's rise to power, right? He was one of the main figures acting on behalf of the State Department and ensuring that Ariel Henry rose to power with 0 elections, by the way, right? He came to power with no elections. You know, these guys always talk about elections, but they installed this guy into power with no elections and kept him in power for years with no elections, right? For years, right? For years. And now they got a whole different administration, once again, backed by the United States with no elections. We haven't had elections in the country since, I don't even know the last time we had elections, bro. The United States just been shuffling guys into power. Anyway, let's continue. Now, I want to talk about the main event, Darrell Blocker, right? Darrell Blocker, as you can see, a recipient of the Distinguished Career Intelligence Medal. Darrell Blocker is a 28-year veteran of the CIA. He served as Deputy Director of Counterterrorism Center and Chief Africa Division after leading the CIA's iconic and legendary training facility. Blocker began his career as an intelligence analyst for the United States Air Force. He served for 4 years, from 1987 to 1990, before separating honorably. He then joined the CIA, formerly known as the Clandestine Service, around 1990. Blocker was a CIA operations officer, chief of station, deputy director of counterterrorism under Michael D'Andrea, and later chief of Africa Division. Subsequently, he went on to lead the CIA training division at Camp Peary, Virginia, better known as the Farm. Throughout his 28-year career, Blocker served in 10 countries: Senegal, Burundi, Uganda, Niger, Nigeria, Somalia, Morocco, and Pakistan. He said, "I've had 27 addresses in my 56 years, 22 of those as an adult." He recruited and developed undercover sources and spies who would provide intelligence about potential threats and targets in his area of responsibility. He began playing music as part of his espionage duties in Senegal in 1996. While undercover in Uganda, Blocker became a minor celebrity as a lead singer in a popular local band in the capital city of Kampala, known as the Jazz All-Stars. Now, that is very interesting that he was actually serving in the Great Lakes region around the same exact time that that massive war was occurring between the Congo and Uganda and Rwanda and things like that. So that was right under his watch, right? When millions upon millions and millions and millions of blacks were being slaughtered in the region for minerals, right? He was watching all that go down, front row seat, working for the CIA. So that was interesting. Anyway, in 2019, Blocker became the chief operating officer of the multinational security firm Mosaic. In August 2019, Blocker joined ABC News as a contributor, appearing on Good Morning America and This Week as a subject matter expert on Africa, Iran, North Korea, and terrorism. He now lives in California. He retired from the CIA in 2018 as the most senior black officer in the Directorate of Operations. He had a rank equivalent to a 3-star general. Upon retirement, he was awarded the CIA's Distinguished Career Intelligence Medal. Now, last but not least, General Michael Langley, the former commander of AFRICOM, right? And of course, we know earlier in the year, there was a whole big scandal, a whole big fiasco because of the intelligence that he was providing the, executives down in Washington about what was happening, or what he alleges what was happening in Africa, particularly with the administration of President Captain Ibrahim Traore.
And I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traore and Burkina Faso, as they know that both, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime.
All right, we back. Now, I thought it'd be an interesting topic. I think it's a topic that has never really been explored, especially in this space. So I thought I'd talk about it. Add some, balance to the discussion, because we have certain individuals that want to talk about, the black immigrants, they come in to undermine these tethers. Listen, bro. We gotta, if we're gonna talk about it, if we're gonna have the conversation, let's talk about it in totality. Let's talk about it in its full totality. Don't talk to me about what somebody said on Twitter Spaces, what somebody said on TikTok, right? We have the historical record. The reality is, like I said in the beginning of the video, every group has those who are working for the advancement and upliftment of the race, and those who are working to serve as an obstacle or a turncoat or sell out for foreign powers, right? Every group has those individuals. There's no single group that has a monopoly on all the, on all the individuals that are working for the upliftment of the race, and the other group has the monopoly on those working to undermine the race, right? That makes no sense. So one group has all the individuals riding for the race, and everybody else is undermining the race, right? So no, I added the nuance to the discussion, right? Something that never gets talked about. Let's talk about the fact that out of the 100,000 CIA agents, about 12% are black men and women, which means there's thousands currently right now in active service in the CIA all around the world currently right now. Probably some in my comment section, probably some with YouTube channels, right? So like I say, let's talk about it in totality for real, right? But when I make this video, I don't make it, in the spirit of hostility. I'm making the video to provide balance and nuance to the discussion. And you notice how a decent chunk of these agents were working to undermine Pan-Africanism, right? Starting all the way back with James Wormley Jones undermining Marcus Garvey and the African Brotherhood back in those days, right? So you notice how the first black agents were used to undermine Pan-Africanism. So would it be far-fetched that these same agents are now being used in the modern day to undermine Pan-Africanism? I mean, would it be far-fetched to assume that, right? So at the end of the day, we have to speak in the totality when we talk. Right. This whole idea of the Africans and the Caribbeans and the black immigrants, they're the only ones undermining and we're the only ones riding for the race. Right. It doesn't make any sense. How does one group is the only ones riding for the race and everybody else is undermining the race? What? Another talking point that was debunked when they say, we're the only ones that practice Pan-Africanism. If you were the only ones that practice Pan-Africanism, how was the United States government able to send black men all to various black countries and they be welcomed with open arms? The reason why they chose to send black men is because they knew that those black men in those different countries obviously held some Pan-African sentiments, and you would be welcomed with open arms and you would not be looked at with suspicion, because they knew if they sent a white man would be seen with suspicion. So they had to send a black man that would be welcomed in as family. But because we held Pan-African sentiments, we allowed, for example, the Haitians, we allowed them to send agents like Charles Young to come to the country and create maps of the country and send information back to the United States government regarding the territory and the terrain, because we assumed that he was a black man like us, a part of the African race. So come on in, bro, come to the country. You can stay for years, man. Welcome in, bro. Oh, you in the military? Oh man, that's what's up, bro. A black man, a warrior. We respect that. Come to find out he was working to undermine and give intelligence back to the white man, right? So like I say, man, every group has their turncoats. Every group has those working for the adversary. Nobody has a monopoly on either side. Nobody has a monopoly on freedom fighting. Nobody has a monopoly on selling out. That's the nuance of the discussion. That's the reason why I made this video, right? Now, I want you guys to email this video or drop this video in the link to, at Professor Black Fiction the Black Irrelevancy and Tariq Nasheed, right? Go send it over to them, let them, address this. I think it would be a great discussion for them to talk about, since they love talking about, undermining. Nobody has a monopoly on undermining, right? Nobody has a monopoly on undermining, as you can see. And obviously, as you can see, Pan-Africanism has been used against us. Agents use Pan-Africanism against us so they can infiltrate and send information back to the adversary, right? So that's why as Pan-Africanists, we have to be, discerning. We have to be on top of our game, and we have to be on our guard, right? Even in the case of Daryl Blocker, you notice how he became a local celebrity in Uganda. They welcomed him in as family. He joined a local band, all of that, right? And what was he doing? Whole time sending information back to George Bush, right? Whole time sending information back to George Bush. But let them tell it Pan-Africanism is dead, and they don't practice Pan-Africanism. They don't practice Pan-Africanism. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And in fact, it has been used against us multiple times, right? So we just have to debunk a lot of propaganda out in the atmosphere. And of course, there are many things I did not talk about. I could talk about how the CIA was involved in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and how they used, Louis Armstrong, at that time as a Trojan horse to distract everybody from the fact that they were planning to kill Patrice Lumumba. I could have talked about, the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, how the CIA was confirmed to be involved in that as well. But the video is already so long, so I couldn't mention all of that. But like I say, man, these things are still active and ongoing. Like I said, 12% of the CIA is black men and black women, and they're in all different fields and all different locations. So the operations are still continuing right now, still to this day. It doesn't stop. The undermining has not stopped. But because we understand, those of us on this side, Pan-Africanists, we understand that the actions of one person doesn't represent the whole group. So the actions of a Daryl Blocker, the actions of a General Michael Langley, the actions of a, Charles Young doesn't represent the entire group, right? So even me, I'll never paint with the broad brush, but I had to come and make this video to provide some balance and nuance to the conversation, because I've seen that it's been getting out of hand. It's been getting out of hand. A lot of y'all ignorant of your history. A lot of y'all don't really know what's going on. You're taking orders from a bunch of people that never graduated high school, a bunch of failed pimps, a bunch of failed actors, a bunch of failed musicians, a bunch of failed entertainers that didn't make it in Hollywood. So now they on YouTube grifting, pushing all these fake narratives for money and notoriety. So, Neferkari Dessalines has to come and make the correction. Anyway, it's your boy Neferkari Dessalines back in the building. Yes, indeed. Second single of the next project is Spy and Bamako. Pin comment at the top. Subscribe to the Patreon, NTD1814, and I'm gone. Peace.
Feel like they see me, I feel like I'm Saudi or ran up on Yana in the middle of Bamako. Enemy line, they claiming they innocent. Don't do no talking, I gotta move militant. Don't do no talking, I hit them with facts. 1804, bringing it back. 1804 like I'm Mother Cap Henry. King with the vision, the crown never empty. Top of the mountain, my soldiers defend me. Ducking and dodging the foreign intelligence. Hitting my dance on the DGSE. Dodging they traps, still on my feet. Feeling impeccable, feel like I'm shining. Go to my neck and I'm flooded with diamonds. Go to my neck and I feel like a mess. Feel like a lion, I'm in the savannah. Feel like the king when I'm up in the jungle. Never defeated, I never been humble. Come out victorious every encounter. Money machine give me help when I count it. Money machine stack it up in a beat. Heart of a king and I ride for the team. Weight of the world got it stuck on my shoulders. Bet you can feel it, my heart getting colder. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she pressure. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she pressure. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater.